Next up, we have Michelle Lenahan. Michelle is our document team lead here at Definiti, and she will be discussing the details of a plan document. So Michelle, take it away.
Thank you, Justin. I too want to say welcome to the Definiti Academy, Retirement Academy, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today to join us. As Justin mentioned, my name is Michelle Lenahan, and I'm the document team lead here. And Stephanie stepped on my joke because I was going to let you know that I've been in the retirement plan industry for about 25 years, which is pretty impressive as I am only 30 years old. But so that was my joke for today. And I'm going to be presenting details of the plan document, or more informally, your document, your friend. And I'm just waiting one moment for my slides to be loaded. Well, in the interim, I will just let you know there will be a couple of things that I will be touching on that will reiterate some of the topics that Stephanie mentioned. Of course, looking at your plan document is where we're going to find what your eligibility requirements are. And I'll just clarify a couple of things when we get to that piece of the presentation. So we can go ahead and probably do next slide. Okay. When you establish a qualified retirement plan, or in some circumstances, a non-qualified retirement plan, such as a 401k, a defined benefit, or cash balance, you will receive a document package. And in that document package will be a basic plan document. This contains all of the non-operational provisions of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA, and the Internal Revenue Code. It will also define some of the common terms that are used within the plan, and it outlines really all available benefits under the code that an plan sponsor might decide to provide to their employees. It's very long, very informational, terribly boring, but it is a good resource if you want more information than you can find in your adoption agreement. Speaking of the adoption agreement, that's the next document that will be part of your package. This reflects the actual provisions that the plan sponsor wants to apply to their plan and the benefits that they would like to provide to their employees. It acts a bit like a checklist. If you're looking at all of the available options, you're going to say, of all of these, we're picking B, or in this section, we're going to do 3. This is how you're going to pick and choose such things as eligibility that Stephanie was mentioning, the types of contributions that you're going to make, when and how distributions are available, things of that nature. Next slide, please. You'll also have a trust agreement, very brief document that outlines the duties and responsibilities of the plan trustee or trustees, and a summary plan description. The summary plan description, commonly referred to as an SPD, is a participant communication that is the plain English version of the document, and it provides information on how the plan works, what benefits are going to be provided, and answers some general questions that a participant might have regarding their benefits under the plan. Next slide, please. So, how can I use these documents? How do they benefit me to have them available to me? Information found in the plan documents will help you to determine who is eligible for the plan, when employees become eligible, and when they'll enter for contribution purposes, which is, of course, what Stephanie was talking about. What compensation is used for plan purposes when we're determining a percentage of pay for an individual's deferral. What pay am I looking at? The documents will also tell you what contributions are available under the plan. What kinds of contributions can the participant make, or will the employer be making? What is the plan's normal retirement age, and what does that mean? What vesting schedules are applicable to employer contributions? Employee contributions are always immediately 100% vested, so that's going to be any pre-tax or Roth deferrals they might make to the plan, any rollover contributions that they might put into the plan. But employer monies, such as a match or profit sharing, can be subject to a schedule that will provide them only with a certain percentage of their account balance from those sources once they terminate employment. So we want to know, is the plan subject to vesting? And if so, what is the schedule? Also, it will let you know if and when distributions and or loans are allowed from the plan. I think this is probably one of the most common areas that a participant is going to be looking to you to see what they have available and being able to access their monies. Next slide, please. So where can I find in my adoption agreement who is eligible for the plan? A caveat here is these next few slides are going to apply to the Definiti 401k adoption agreement. The defined benefit, cash balance, or 403b adoption agreements are going to run very similar and have a very similar layout. There are some minor differences. If you joined the Definiti family as part of an acquisition and you're currently on another provider's adoption agreement, this information will be in those documents for you. They just will probably be in a little bit different location. As you request any elective changes to your document, or if before that, we have a mandatory restatement, which does occur every 6 years, where we have to rewrite the document. We will put you on the Definiti document, and then it will align with these sections. But just be aware that if you're on a different provider, these sections will not necessarily apply, but you'll still be able to find that information somewhere within your adoption agreement. So where can I find who is eligible for the plan and when do they become eligible? When do they enter? Section 3 of the adoption agreement is going to detail any excluded employees. So as Stephanie mentioned, the most common exclusions will be collectively bargained or union employees, leased employees, non-resident aliens. There are a number of other exclusions that are available in there. Though they are listed, they could potentially have an impact on the overall mandatory testing of your plan. So you are going to want to discuss those in the design when you're first establishing your plan, or as time goes by, speak with your retirement plan consultant, and they can help determine whether or not this is going to have a negative impact on your plan. Section 4 is where you're going to find the requirements that must be met to enter the plan, as well as the date entry will commence. Section 4 also details and defines certain terms that are used in relation to those requirements. So as Stephanie was mentioning, you might have age 21. That's pretty straightforward. Then you'll have a year of service. In Section 4, it's going to define what a year of service is. The default is going to be a 12-month period in which an individual completes 1,000 hours of service. However, you can have some leeway in how you're defining that year of service. You could lower the hours. You could use just the 12 months without worrying about hours of service. You can also, in this section, say we're going to have a special effective date where anyone who's employed as of X date is automatically eligible, and then anyone after that date will have to meet the requirements that are set forth in this section. Next slide, please. Where can I find what compensation to use for plan purposes? In determining compensation, Section 5 will tell you what you're using. Most common is probably W-2 compensation, so it's going to be that what is reported on an employee's W-2. You're also going to be able to outline any exclusions from compensation, such as bonuses, commissions, overtime, reimbursements, things of that nature, or none. Maybe you're going to look at all compensation when determining contributions under the plan. You also will define here for the initial plan year that a participant is eligible, you can take only their pay after their entry date into consideration when you're determining what kinds of contributions they're going to be entitled to. This is where you're going to find all of that information. Another consideration, some forms of exclusion can impact your plan. So it's another area where you're going to want to discuss that with your retirement plan consultant. I suppose I should have called this your retirement plan consultant, your friend. They're going to help you the most with a lot of these provisions. Where can I find what contributions are available under the plan? Section 6 details the available contributions. There's your initial Section 6 and then some subcategories. Section 6 outlines employer discretionary contributions commonly referred to as profit sharing. It will detail the formulas that are used. Is it a fixed contribution, or is it discretionary and we're deciding each year whether or not we want to provide one? How are we determining who will get how much? The section will also detail if you're going to assign allocation requirements. An individual has to be employed on the last day of the plan year, and they have to have worked 1,000 hours during that plan year. Or it'll say there are no allocation requirements. It'll also provide for any exceptions. If you have those requirements and an individual passed away or retired, you might indicate in there, well, we're going to give them the contribution anyway. This is where you're going to find whether or not those exceptions apply. 6A breaks down and refers to salary deferrals that can be made to the plan. This is going to say whether or not an individual can defer comp from their pay and put it into the plan. Deferrals are pre-tax. You can also offer Roth deferrals, which are made on an after-tax basis. These are distinct and separate from after-tax contributions, which we'll touch on very briefly in another section. But they would be detailed here. You could indicate whether or not there was a minimum or maximum deferral amount. You can indicate whether or not there's an automatic contribution or automatic enrollment. If you're using that, here's where you'll find what your minimum required contribution is for those individuals that are being automatically enrolled. It'll have information about how frequently they can make changes to their elections. So this is where your salary deferral information is going to be housed. Next screen, please. 6B is dedicated to matching contributions. Here you'll decide whether or not you're going to match those deferrals that are made into the plan. If it's a fixed match, again, discretionary, where you're deciding each year whether or not you want to do a match, what formula are you going to use? And how frequently will you make the contributions? Will it be per pay period or at the end of the plan year? And again, you can assign allocation requirements and say an individual must be employed on the last day of the plan year to share in the match, or they have to have a certain number of hours. 6C is where we're going to look to see if the plan utilizes safe harbor contributions. Safe harbor contributions are a special employer contribution, immediately 100% vested, and they're used typically to help avoid some of the problematic discrimination testing issues that some plans can have. They help to satisfy top-heavy minimum requirements, and they can help with deferral testing. There are two different types of safe harbor contributions. There are safe harbor match, safe harbor non-elective. Here's where you're going to detail which one of those you're going to want to use. Also, if no other elections apply in this section, eligibility for safe harbor contributions will follow that of salary deferrals. If you wanted to exclude highly compensated employees from getting the safe harbor, here's where you'd indicate that. If you have a very lenient requirements to enter for deferrals, but you really want them to be there longer, maybe have a year of service before sharing in the safe harbor, you would put that here in 6C. You could have a separate eligibility requirement for those safe harbor contributions. And then 6D is your special contribution section, very rarely used. This is where you would see if your plan offers after-tax contributions. After-tax contributions can be tricky. They're subject to certain testing that can make it difficult to pass. And if you do want to utilize those, again, you want to speak with your retirement plan consultant and take a look and see if it would be beneficial for your plan or if they ultimately, wouldn't really work. Next slide, please. Where can I find the plan's normal retirement age and what does that mean? Section 7 has your normal retirement age as well as an early retirement age if applicable. Normal retirement age can and often does impact vesting, contribution allocations, and the availability for certain types of distributions. So it is important to know if someone has met their normal retirement age. Under regulation, an individual is immediately 100% vested upon normal retirement age, but there may be an instance where you're making a profit sharing contribution and the individual has left the employer and it ends up they've retired and they met that eligibility, that normal retirement age. If you have an exception in your allocation conditions in Section 6, saying if someone terminates due to retirement, they're going to share in that contribution, this is where we're going to know they've met that age, they retired, they're going to share in that contribution. Where can I find what vesting schedules are applicable to employer contributions? As I mentioned before, any employee monies, salary deferral, pre-tax or Roth, their rollover contributions, they might have rolled from a prior employer's plan or from an IRA, and the safe harbor contributions made by the employer are all immediately 100% vested. But you can subject employer match and profit sharing to a vesting schedule. An individual would become vested in those monies that are held in their account based on typically a year of service. In Section 8, it's going to detail what schedule you're using, probably the most common being a 6-year graded, which would mean after 2 years of service, you'd be 20% vested, 3 years, 40%, etc. And it would also detail what's going to happen to those monies when they leave if they weren't 100% vested, and those are called forfeitures. Here in Section 8, you can also define what is a year of service for vesting purposes. The default, again, with no separate election, is a plan year in which an individual works 1,000 hours. So if Joe has been with the plan sponsor for 3 years, and he has monies in his employer match and employer profit sharing accounts, he is going to be entitled to 40% of those account balances, and the remaining 60% will forfeit, and the plan will be able to use those monies in the way that's outlined in Section 8. Typically, the default for forfeitures is at the employer discretion. Forfeitures can be used for reallocation to everyone who still has is still employed as of the last day of the plan year. They can be used to reduce future contributions. Let's say you're going to make a $60,000 contribution and you have $10,000 sitting in forfeitures. The check you'd write would only be for $50,000, or you could use it to pay certain plan expenses. So you're sort of getting that money back in a way in that you're able to use it and the participant wasn't entitled to it. Next slide, please. Where can I tell if and when distributions or loans are allowed? Section 9 will show you what provisions are available and pertain to termination of service distributions. So these are separation of service, retirement, or disability. They will detail what forms of distribution are allowed. Typically, it's a lump sum. You leave, your whole $50,000 account balance is going to be paid out either to you or as a rollover. The plan can allow for partial distributions, installment distributions. Here's where you're going to select what options you want to provide for a terminated individual. You're also going to be able to apply any special rules. If you decide to allow partial distributions, is there a minimum amount? How frequently can they request a distribution? Also in Section 9 is where we're going to determine whether or not the plan allows for mandatory distribution for amounts of less than $5,000. The mandatory distribution allows the plan sponsor to inform the participant that they have an account balance in the plan. They have X days to return a benefit election form, at least 30 days, no more than 90. If they do not return that form and make their election, they can force those monies out of the plan. So they're not tracking a terminated participant's account balance for decades. If the amount is greater than $1,000, that forced distribution must be in the form of a rollover to an IRA. But here in this section, you can also say we don't want to do any mandatory distributions, or we're going to do them, and every amount, even less than 1,000, will be a rollover to an IRA. Here's where you would find that information. You're also going to find whether or not the individual can take an in-kind distribution. If you have brokerage or stock accounts, are they able to just have those renamed and take those in kind? Or do they have to cash them out and take a cash distribution only? Meaning they could still roll it to an IRA, but it can't be in an in-like form. Section 10, this is, I think, probably what will be the most reviewed section of the adoption agreement and or a plan summary plan description, will be in-service distributions. And this is when your employees are still actively employed with you, but they'd like to access their money for some reason. This is where you would indicate whether or not they could have a distribution upon normal retirement age, or typically you'll find younger at age 59 and a half. Here's where you'll detail whether or not the employees can access their money for hardship distribution. The hardships, there are certain reasons that qualify as hardships, and those are outlined in the summary plan description, but of course, you can always get more information from your retirement plan consultant. The section 10 will also detail whether or not your rollover monies typically by default are available at any time, but you could specify we only want them to be accessed when they're otherwise available. You're also going to put in any rules and regulations, such as they are allowed hardships, but it must be at least $1,000, or they're only allowed to take one a year. And finally, the other in-service distribution that a person would probably be looking for would be a loan. Are loans allowed? This is going to be in Appendix B. Appendix B will, of course, indicate whether or not loans are allowed. It will provide any minimum loan amount, the interest rate. You can thank you. Truly apologize for that. My computer just kicked me out. I think it thought I was being a little too wordy today. So, but I think we should be all set. I was actually very, very close to finish with my presentation. I was just addressing where in the plan document you would be able to find in the adoption agreement whether or not loans are allowed. That's going to be in Appendix B. And again, here is where you're going to indicate whether or not a participant can take a loan, detail the provisions such as minimum amount, maximum amount. Now, the statutory maximum is the lesser of 50% of a vested account balance or $50,000. But you could certainly set a lower maximum if you wanted to. You could indicate how many loans a participant can have out at a time. Typically, that would be 1 to 2. I have seen plans where it was unlimited. That's a very slippery slope. So you would want to discuss that with your retirement plan consultant before moving forward with something like that. The Appendix B can also tell you whether or not there are any restrictions on what accounts the loans can be made from. You might allow them only from employee monies, or only if there's 100% vested, things of that nature. So that's where you're going to find the information on loans. Probably one of the most common questions from a participant to their plan sponsor is, can I take a loan? And then that was it. So I was so close, but certainly if there are any questions, then I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes. So do we have any additional questions for Michelle and or Matt? Okay. Oh, looks like we just got one in. Oh, is the awesome Don Becker going to make a cameo appearance? Not today. Not today, Craig. So, all right, that concludes day 1 of our Definiti Retirement Academy session. I would like to thank all of you guys for taking your time and participating and listening to our speakers today. Today we covered eligibility, details of a plan document, and took a closer look at plan services and fees with Definiti. Keep in mind, like I said, if you have any additional questions on those topics, please do not hesitate to send those questions to your RPC, and we will make sure that we get you a very prompt response. We will continue with day 2 tomorrow, where we'll cover finding your inner fiduciary, take a detailed look at plan participants, and also a look at Definiti's plan sponsor link. Once again, thank you, and we will see you guys tomorrow.